Alright. Hello YouTube. Today I just wanted to try something a bit different. Today I'd like to talk about some gripes I have with Wiz that I might not have had in the past. And just to get out of the way, no, this is not an I'm quitting video. This is not I hate the game video. I love this game. I've played this game for 12 or so years now. I started when I was 9 and I'm 21 now, so I've kind of stuck with it. It's been pretty off and on in the past few years, but I still love this game. I'm coming back onto it recently. Other MMOs just stopped interesting me. Quite frankly, I'm tired of the GCD gameplay. But yeah, I just want to talk about some of my gripes with the game, and feel free to disagree. That's always fine. Everyone can have their own opinion on the game. Some people still love it. I still love it, like I said over and over again now. But some things I don't love as much as I used to. Anyway, I'd like to begin by talking about the design of the Arc 1 worlds, and yeah, mainly the Arc 1 worlds. The Arc 2 worlds didn't have this problem. When it comes to the Arc 1 worlds, you might notice something about the design of all 5 of them. And to demonstrate, I'd like to show you a screenshot of Chelsea Court and then a screenshot of Newgate Prison, both areas from Marleybone. Now, after seeing those two screenshots, do you think you could identify which is which? Not me. You know why? Because Arc 1 operates on like a chunk, preset cookie cutter layout design for its streets, not the commons areas like Digmore Station, Regent Square, all of that. Those are custom made. The streets, however, for the most part, are not so custom made. In fact, they feel very copy pasty. You can tell it very much in Crocotopia, especially Dragonspire. They try to alter the decoration sometimes. Sometimes, for example, in Crocotopia, the Pyramid of Fire areas are red. The Crocosphinx areas are blue, and the Tomb of Storms are purple. Obviously, to match the schools they tie into. Looking at even Mushu. Mushu has some very similar feeling areas, but some of them at least have a slight color difference, like in the Tree of Life. You can tell it's very much darker because it's death themed. But then Dragonspire and Marleybone specifically kinda feel very samey in almost every area. Wizard City almost has this, similar to Crocotopia. It has different colors, so like Triton Avenue is purple and yellow, Firecat is red, and Cyclops is yellow. And the graphical update also kinda helped that, which is great. I kinda hope they come around to doing the Crocotopia graphical update soon. But while the graphical update helped Wizard City, it didn't completely remove the problem. You can tell that some areas are still very blocky. That is to say, like preset cookie cutter geography. Anyway, yeah, that's something that's always bothered me. In fact, mainly over the past couple years that I've been easing back into Wiz, I've been noticing this a lot, and it's kind of been bothering me. It's not present in the Arc 2 worlds. I think Grizzleheim was the first world to not do the cookie cutter design. Every area is custom made completely, and then obviously that carried over into Celestia and onwards. But yeah, that's my main gripe with the world design in Arc 1. Next, I would like to talk about bosses and some of the things I've noticed about them over the years. The main way, this applies to Arc 2, the main way that they like to increase the difficulty of bosses in Arc 2 is by having the boss start with a lot of pips. And sure, that increases the difficulty a little bit, but bosses are kinda stupid. Just enemies in general are kinda stupid. Because what happens is that on, say, an Azteca or Chrysalis, if a boss knows a 10 pip spell and they start with 10 pips, let's say, they can cast their 10 pip spell first thing. Okay, that's a pretty big, spike damage at the start of the fight, but that boss is never going to cast that 10 pip spell again, because every time the boss has the chance to cast something, it will cast it unless it coin flips and decides to pass. So basically, if a boss has a low pip AoE or like just a lower pip spell in general, like a natural attack, they will probably always end up using that instead of ever using the high pip spell. And the way KingsIsle tried to remedy this in Mirage, and I love this change, mobs have a damage stat, an inherent damage stat, and what that means is that even their lower pip spells begin to hurt more, which is wonderful. I love that, and I really wish they go back to previous worlds, Arc 1 and 2, and implement that. They don't need to be really high damage stats, obviously, but some bosses at least I feel could benefit from, being a challenge. A lot of bosses are very cookie cutter. This ties into the whole general gameplay loop of Wizard101, PvE that is. Blade, 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 feint, attack. In the case of a mob battle, blade, blade, AoE, and you're done. And that's pretty much the gameplay from level 1 to max. And while I still love the gameplay, but at Arc 1 and Arc 2, it gets pretty repetitive. And next, I will talk about cheats. When it comes to cheats, cheats aren't really required for the player to learn and face until the end of Celestia with the Trial of the Spheres, which is the final dungeon of Celestia. That feels very late to me. I feel like cheats, if you've ever played any other MMO or just any other game in general, a cheat you might recognize as a boss mechanic. And these are wonderful, of course. I don't think they need to be on every boss. Some bosses just having a damage stat, or maybe like a stat that lets them generate more pips than usual, or any kind of, modifier. I feel like every boss should have some kind of modifier, personally. At least ones in later worlds, that is to say, Arc 2 and such. Back on topic. Celestia, the very last dungeon is where the first cheating bosses are required, which feels very late, and personally, I don't feel like all of Arc 1 should be tutorial. By the end of by the end of Marleybone rather, I feel like the player at that point would have a pretty good grasp on the gameplay of Wiz, and yeah, there are still systems that are not available at that point, such as shadow spells, arch mastery, important spells that every school makes advantage of, sharpen blade, potent trap, and the higher level enchants, or any enchants for that matter. There's a lot of things that by the end of Marleybone you don't have yet, but by that point you understand the general gist of how the game is played. And I feel like by that point in Mushu, at least for like the Onis, or definitely Malistaire, if anything in Dragonspire, he should have a cheat. I'm not sure why he doesn't, actually. Back in the day, just him having 10,000 health was, difficulty enough. But nowadays, I feel like going back and adding some cheats to Arc 1 bosses that are not optional, such as Brisk Breeze Tower. Does anyone remember Brisk Breeze Tower? I forgot about it until just now, but required bosses that cheat, I feel would fit perfectly. It would ease the player into slightly more difficult encounters, which are more apparent in Arc 2. So cheats are the second way that King's Isle likes to increase the difficulty of a boss. Now, when it comes to the boss's stat, I would like to mention the only stat with the boss that increases is their HP, or their health. And that's pretty much the real scale for most bosses. Like I said, a lot of bosses, they share the exact same AI as one another, the ones that don't cheat. And that's great and all, but HP scaling, I feel, is not enough to make the bosses particularly difficult. It doesn't change the way you approach the boss, and it doesn't change the spells you would cast normally to defeat a boss. You're gonna do the same thing, just you might have to blade one or two more times, or put an extra feint, or something to, boost your damage just enough to put it over the edge. And what I will say is, again, Mirage remedied this by giving them stats, but Mirage also decreased the average HP of enemies in a world to make up for them having inherent damage stats. I feel like personally that change was not required. They didn't need to decrease the health of bosses. If bosses stayed at Azteca or Chrysalis level health on average, that would have been perfectly fine. And the increased damage would have provided a good difficulty boost. So personally, I know I said earlier, I wish they'd go back and implement damage stats to Arc 1 bosses and Arc 2 bosses. I also wish in Arc 3 they would raise the health of bosses and just general enemies, especially in Polaris. Polaris is the first world of Arc 3, but it does not feature the increased damage stat that wasn't until Mirage, the world after it, but it still has greatly reduced enemy health, which feels very weird. Polaris is a very, take a breather type of world. It comes after Chrysalis, which is, in my opinion, kind of infamous for being tough, harder so than Azteca even. A lot of people crap on Azteca, but I love that world. Anyway, Polaris is such an easy world that you fly through it, and then you're kind of shocked when you get to Mirage and see that it has mobs with damage. And in fact, Mirage also introduced double school mobs, but that's less important. Anyway, that's enough rambling about that. My point is that bosses are very easy in general in Arc 1 and Arc 2. There's no cheats to be found in Arc 1 at all, and the damage stat I feel would be a positive change to all of Arc 1 and all of Arc 2. Again, the stats don't need to be super high, but I'd love to see them. And okay, one more thing I'd like to complain about, and yes, complain about, this is something I've always hated, and I always will hate, and will never change, but I'm still going to complain about it. So listen if you want, but I'd like to talk about the arsenal of mobs in Arc 1, some of Arc 2, and by arsenal I mean weakness. Mobs should not have weakness unless they're balanced. Why do so many mobs in Arc 1 have weakness? Ice mobs have weakness, life mobs have weakness especially, death mobs have weakness. These guys do not learn weakness naturally. An ice having tower shield, I get that. It stalls the fight out longer, but at least it makes sense because an ice mob trains ice spells, which means they have tower shield. But a life mob should not have weakness. What's the point? If anything, life mob should have heals. Okay. that was a little tangent there about weakness and how much I hate it. Shout out to the fonts of weakness in Lore Master. I don't know if that's still there or not. I haven't done it in a while, but good times. And by good times, I mean terrible times. Anyway, if you stuck around through that weakness rant, I salute you. But that about sums up things I'd like to talk about. Things that I've noticed in recent years as I've come back into Wizard101 that I maybe don't like as much as I remember liking, or maybe just things I didn't notice back in the day or have a problem with. So yeah, I just wanted to try a bit of a different kind of video. I'm still working on the 4-pip challenge if you guys are interested in that. We will get to Crocotopia soon. But yeah, I normally don't have the webcam on. I just felt like mixing it up a little bit. It might have gotten a little darker throughout the video. It is the evening right now. Sun's going down, my window's open, so who knows, we'll figure that out later in editing. But yeah, let me know if you agree or disagree with the things I've said, and you know, feel free to tell me what you like or dislike. And yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys later.